The platoon was pinned down behind a shattered stone wall, dust drifting through the air as enemy rounds cracked overhead. The squad leader tried shouting orders, but the gunfire drowned everything out. Then, through the chaos, a single sound rose above the rest, a deep thunderous boom that rolled across the field like a hammer striking the earth. The M2 Browning had opened up. Its .50 caliber rounds tore through the air with a force that felt almost unreal, punching through vehicles, walls, and anything unlucky enough to be in its path. In seconds, the battlefield shifted. Enemy fire slowed. Heads went down. The tide turned. Because when the M2 Browning speaks, the battlefield listens. The story of the M2 Browning begins long before World War II. In the final months of World War I, American troops were facing German armored vehicles and aircraft that their rifles and machine guns simply couldn't stop. The U.S. Army needed something bigger, something stronger. Something that could punch through steel. They turned to one man. John Moses Browning. He was already a legend, the mind behind the 1911 pistol, the bar, and dozens of other designs. But this time, the Army asked him for something unprecedented. A machine gun firing a half-an-inch round with enough power to tear through armor. Browning didn't hesitate. He built the M2, a weapon so powerful, so reliable, and so brutally effective that it would outlive every war it fought in. To understand the M2, you have to understand its ammunition. The .50 BMG round isn't just a bullet. It's a statement. Each cartridge is nearly 6 inches long, weighing more than an entire magazine of rifle ammo. Fired at over 2,800 feet per second, it can punch through concrete engine blocks, steel plates, and lightly armored vehicles. Soldiers describe the impact as a fist the size of a hammer traveling faster than sound. The M2 didn't just fire bullets. It fired consequences. The M2 Browning is a masterpiece of engineering simplicity, recoil-operated. Belt-fed, air-cooled slow, heavy, unstoppable its rate of fire. Around 450 to 600 rounds per minute. Isn't fast, it doesn't need to be. Every round is a sledgehammer. The gun's massive weight, nearly 84 pounds with the tripod, gives it stability that lighter weapons can't match. When the M2 fires, it doesn't chatter or climb. It pushes. A deep steady recoil that feels like the heartbeat of a machine built for war. By the time World War II erupted, the M2 was everywhere, on tanks, on jeeps, on aircraft, on ships, on defensive positions. On every front of the war, American soldiers trusted it. German soldiers feared it. The M2 could tear through half-tracks, disable aircraft, and shred cover that other weapons couldn't touch. In the Pacific, Marines used it to cut through jungle fortifications. In Europe, it stopped armored vehicles dead in their tracks. One German officer wrote after the war. The American. It was an artillery piece. Operating the M2 wasn't just a job, it was a responsibility. Gunners described the feeling of firing it as controlling a thunderstorm. The weapon demanded respect. Its recoil, its heat, its sheer destructive power. But it also gave soldiers something priceless. When the M2 was set up, troops felt safer. When it opened fire, they felt unstoppable. It wasn't just a weapon. It was a guardian. In Korea, the M2 proved itself again. Chinese and North Korean forces often attacked in massive waves. The M2's heavy rounds tore through winter coats, frozen earth, and makeshift cover. It was one of the few weapons that could reliably stop human wave assaults. On the frozen hills of Korea, the M2 became a lifeline. Vietnam brought a different battlefield. dense jungle, ambushes, and hit-point-run tactics. But the M2 adapted, mounted on helicopters. It became a flying wall of fire. On riverboats. It dominated waterways. It was evolving. By the 1980s, most World War II-era weapons were long gone, not the M2. The U.S. military tried replacing it multiple times. Every attempt failed. New guns jammed, overheated, or broke down. The M2 kept firing. Engineers eventually gave up trying to replace it. Instead, they upgraded it. The M2HB became the M201 with the same soul but faster barrel changes, improved safety, modern materials. But the heart of the weapon? Still Browning's original design. From Iraq to Afghanistan to modern conflict zones, the M2 remains a frontline weapon. It destroys vehicles. It stops suicide trucks. It provides overwatch for convoys. 80 years after its creation, the M2 Browning is still shaping the battlefield. No other machine gun in history has served this long, this widely, or this effectively. Long before the M2 Browning ever fired a shot, its presence alone changed the battlefield. Soldiers describe the feeling of seeing it mounted on a vehicle or dug into a position as a promise. A guarantee that if things went bad, something unstoppable was on their side. Enemy troops learned the same lesson. Many accounts from World War II, Korea, and Vietnam describe enemy fighters avoiding areas where they believed an M2 was positioned, not because they saw it, but because they heard it. The sound of the M2 wasn't like other guns. It didn't chatter, it didn't rattle, it boomed, a deep rolling concussion that echoed across valleys and jungles. Even when fired miles away, soldiers could feel the vibration in their chest. It was a reminder that somewhere out there, a weapon existed that could punch through almost anything. This psychological effect became part of its legend. The M2 didn't just dominate the battlefield physically. It dominated mentally. Today, militaries around the world are experimenting with lasers, drones, and autonomous weapons. But the M2 Browning remains unchanged in purpose, unmatched in reliability. Modern engineers have studied it, upgraded it, and tried to replace it, but the truth is simple: nothing else delivers the same combination of range, power, and durability. The M2 is more than a machine gun. It's a benchmark. Every new heavy weapon is compared to it. Every new design is measured against it, and every modern battlefield still makes room for it. Because the M2 Browning isn't just a weapon from the past, it's a weapon built so well. It became part of the future. A machine gun that outlived its wars, outlived its rivals, and outlived every attempt to replace it. A machine gun that refuses to die. John Browning never lived to see the M2 enter full service. But his design became immortal. The M2 Browning is more than a machine gun. It's a symbol of American firepower. A weapon that changed warfare. A weapon that soldiers trusted with their lives. A weapon that refuses to die. This is the story of the M2 Browning, the heavy machine gun that never left the battlefield. And never will.